Hey everybody, once again, I'm Gunnar. I'm a CTO at Citrix DNA Group, and I'm here with Jeff McNaught. Now I'm going to give you a little background here. I completely screwed up. Jeff and I actually shot a video in Texas a couple weeks ago, and it went really well, but I called the series, they gave me a camera because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I screwed up the audio. So we had no good audio of that entire shoot, and it was a really fun conversation. And so for the first time in my thing, I actually have some notes with me today. And we're going to repeat a conversation that Jeff and I had because it was fun. Jeff talked a lot about the history of Wyse and where we're going from here. And I want to just repeat that for you guys today. And hopefully I get audio and everything right. But let's just jump into it. This is Jeff McNaught. Jeff, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? You can talk to me or the camera.
Sure. I got to give you huge props for that full disclosure, by the way. Lesser people would just have re-edited and pretended it had all gone perfectly the first time. So, Gunnar, I've known you forever. For those of you watching, I'm Jeff McNaught. Probably best known for being with Wyse for 27 years and now with Dell as part of the Wyse acquisition. And I've held many roles inside of both Wyse and Dell, having to do with strategy, technology, marketing, especially now marketing. And my claim to fame was I'm the co-inventor of the original Wyse and client.
So last time we talked, you kind of brought me through the whole history of Wyse. And it was so fascinating. I remember we had a bunch of people in the room. I don't remember half of them that were there, but like our Citrix people were there, and you have more Dell people there. And I just know everyone there, as their eyes kind of got bigger and bigger as you were talking about the history of Wyse. So let's do that again. I found it really fascinating. Can you kind of walk me through, the one thing that I remember specifically, you said Citrix was our first partner. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of walked us through, like, what was that? And let's go back to, what was that, 90s time frame?
Sure, yeah. I mean, what is now a multi-billion-dollar industry started on a very, very dark day, October of 1994. And on that day, I and a couple of other executives shut down Wyse's PC and server business. That was a good business for Wyse, and Wyse had a very clever way of making all of our PCs processor upgradable, but that added cost. And companies like Compaq had come in and gone to the super low cost, single motherboard kind of design, usually building offshore, et cetera. And it just made it tough for us. And so management decided October 8th, that was when we were going to change our focus. And so we laid off our teams, and that's the hardest thing that you can do as an executive. And then the executive team pulled us in and selected 4 people who survived from those teams. A gentleman named Kurt Schwebke, who was our head of engineering at that time and is now a Dell CTO, myself, and then 2 other members from the PC division. And they sat us down and they said, "You're the new strategic business development center," is what they called us. And so they split us into 2 teams and said, "You guys have to go off and figure out what the future of Wyse was." You can imagine the concern one would have when this has just happened. And if we don't come up with an amazing idea, it's a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise in our future. So Kurt and I actually got split off. And I'd known Kurt for years, so we worked very well together. And we sat down and really said, what does Wyse known for? Which was terminals. Number 1 terminal company in the world, beat IBM, beat everybody else, did that better than anyone else. Great ergonomics, et cetera. And so the idea was, what can we do that makes sense for the Wyse brand? And what could we do to make the idea of terminals, which are very practical devices, but they're not cool, right? If you think of 1994, that's sort of Windows, Windows XP. Windows XP, I think, had just come out.
94 is 95.
Okay, you're right. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Windows 95. And so, anything that didn't deliver internet access, full graphics, didn't make any sense. And so we set about building a more secure way to access a Windows environment for businesses. Now, when we first conceptualized the idea, we went in and talked to the executive team at Wyse, and I pitched the story for about an hour and a half. Midway through my pitch, our president simply walked out of the room. He didn't think it was possible to make a product that could deliver sort of the mainframe idea, but the Windows application load, right? And so we had to do a lot of proving. Kurt and I spent about 6 months doing research. We'd show up at trade shows and pop up ideas and talk to people, and we worked with all the analyst firms, very close with IDC, Forrester, and Gartner, of course. And so we decided that this actually made some sense, but the challenge was there are really three pieces you have to make this work. You have to have your endpoint, and it has to be able to deal with the kind of information that's going to come to it, because we're talking about highly graphical stuff. You're going to need a protocol that works across serial, networking, Wi-Fi, everything else. And then, of course, you need some sort of mainframe that's going to actually run the applications in a way that people and businesses expect. And it has to be able to deliver something that you can't get today. And we identified fairly early on that we could improve the bar in management and security with this approach. So we went out and talked to a lot of companies because we understood how to build the device, but we didn't have a protocol, and we certainly didn't have the technology available to make the mainframe work, if you will. And so we talked to a bunch of different companies. We ran across this company called Citrix, and we thought, well, they make orange juice in Florida. What the hell are they doing having something to do with high tech? And it only had 50 employees at that time. Roger Roberts was the CEO. Ed Akabuchi was the chairman. I met with Ed and Roger and a bunch of the Wyse people, and we sort of talked about the idea. They thought it was a very cool idea. I remember about a week later, as we were sort of sharing with the Wyse executive team what we had decided that we kind of wanted to work with a Citrix company. They said, why would we post our future on a company in Florida with only 50 employees? Is this really, Wyse is big and Citrix is tiny. Of course, you look fast forward now and look how things have changed. But it turned out to be the right decision. And in fact, after a lot of work together between the two companies in 1994, and then in 1995, in December of 1995, we introduced in a single trade show booth, Citrix introduced WinFrame and Wyse introduced WinTerm. And so these were designed to work together to deliver that vision. Everything had been worked out. Of course, the very first versions of our devices were serial devices, and built on these big CRT platforms. Kind of like you see terminals today. You think of them as CRT and a couple of cables, and that's the end of it.
Was this WTOS? Wyse Thin OS? Or
No. This was something where even before that, the operating system inside the WinTerm 2000, which was the very first model ever introduced, was something we called BOS, B-O-S, Basic Operating System. It was very little it was all designed at Wyse, but there wasn't much in it except for, a network stack, which was serial driven at that time. And then there were some basic security parameter technology settings, and then a ICA client. That was really it in the very first WinTerms. And, we launched the product at Comdex 1995. We launched it on Monday. Wednesday, we won the Best of Comdex award.
This week on the Computer Chronicles, we take you to Comdex in Las Vegas for a look at the newest computer technologies, like this new low-cost internet terminal from Wyse.
Thursday morning, our president, a guy named Doug Chance, who joined us sort of right before we started the project, gets a call from Microsoft saying, what are you people doing with Windows to make it work on a terminal? I think they were offended, quite frankly, right? And so literally that day, Doug and I get tickets on whatever airline would take us to Redmond immediately, and I grab one of the WinTerms, which is like this huge hulking, 50-pound device, get it on the plane.
Did they make you power it on as you went through security?
Fortunately, that was pre-9/11, so you could take a hippo on an airplane if you really wanted to back then. And that was kind of the equivalent of what I was dragging. So we get to Redmond. Doug and I are sitting in the lobby waiting to talk to this Microsoft vice president who's going to have this conversation with us. And we thought, holy cow, this is scary, because if this conversation doesn't go well, in 3 weeks we're working at Taco Bell. And because Microsoft had the ability to kind of shut this whole idea down if they felt like it wasn't good. And so we go in and we meet with this vice president, and it's 3 hours of Doug talking, and I'm showing slides and waving my arms and demonstrating the product, and just hoping to God that we survive this meeting with our jobs and our futures intact. And at the end of the meeting, the vice president says, Bill and I have talked about this, and we see there's a position for this in the market. We see there's an opportunity. It doesn't meet with our strategy today. At that time it was a PC on every desktop. And but we're going to kind of give you some runway to do this, right? He didn't say it exactly this way, but I think my recollection was he says, we're going to let you live. So that was good, right? And so they kind of gave us a blessing to continue on and actually some assistance, and started working with us on a product that ultimately became Windows NT Terminal Server Edition, which debuted a couple years later in 1997. Now, the amazing thing about that is that, you think about how Microsoft was organized then and what was important, and this was a long time ago. The guy who made these decisions is someone you know very well, and I know very well now, Paul Moritz. Talk about having the vision, right, and kind of carrying it forward. So that was the start of this whole thing.
It's a small community. I mean, the more you go deeper in this thing, it's crazy how small the community actually is. But
it really is. And if you think about it, Citrix and Wyse has been exchanging employees, for the last 20 years. And of course, now that Dell's involved, that makes it even bigger and better, and our story expands really dramatically.
One of the things I've seen out there is the religious debate around zero client.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I worked at a zero client vendor that we did it on an ASIC chip, and I drank the Kool-Aid. So when I think of zero client, I think of ASIC, and I think anyone else outside of that, they're trying to make up something that's a zero client. But you've also seen people that drink the Kool-Aid, like Pano, didn't turn out well for them. So I understand that my Kool-Aid may not be the best, but I still have that mentality that zero client means firmware only. And so when I think Wyse and OS, I think, well, it's a small version of Linux. And I know just talking to our sales force and everything else that they're out there, and the federal government wants to have zero clients, and so they're only going to they kind of drink the same Kool-Aid I did. How have you guys responded to that, given that your kind of flagship operating system is TOS now? The Wyse has been dropped as TOS.
ThinOS.
ThinOS.
We don't call it TOS.
Sorry. I go back a ways. It was WTOS for like a decade
Totally
of
get
my
your
life.
question. So here's the thing. You've got to understand the design objective for a zero client. A zero client is, when properly architected, does three things. The first thing it does is it is ultra secure. You don't have to worry about data residing on the device. You don't have to worry about software on the device that could be, if a device was stolen, that could be harvested for passwords or anything like that, right? The second thing is it has to be either no management or light management. We call it automatic management in this case, because people buy a zero client thinking they'll put it in as an appliance, they'll never touch it again. And that's really part of the vision and the benefit of using a thin client, is sort of install once, visit never. And the third idea is it should be very, very fast, because there's no sludge, operating system sludge like Linux, which is way bigger than what you really need in that kind of device, in the way. Now, so here's something that most people don't know. The very first all hardware zero client was developed at Wyse in 2006. It was called Project Nano, and we developed it based on those three criteria that I just talked to you about. It was all ASIC based, had almost no software layer in it at all. And here's what we learned. But first off, you probably know we never introduced it to the market. What we learned is that building a zero client that has all hardware and no software is a device that is frozen in time. It's a device that can't adapt to changes in security protocols, changes in graphical protocols, or any sort of changes that come into the market in terms of sorting peripherals. Well, yeah. Link's a great example, right? And so we tested the device in 2006, ultimately never brought it to market, and actually OEM'd it to another thin client manufacturer who sold it, not terribly successfully, but it was, in fact, the CEO who worked for Wyse at the time went to go work for Panologic, and he wouldn't listen to me that the right zero client approach is one that delivers those three values, but has the ability to be updated based on the realities of our industry, right? And so we canned that thing at Wyse and started to build ThinOS. And now the common misconception is that ThinOS is Linux or has Linux in it. No, ThinOS is completely and uniquely, it's written by us, and it has no open source, that could cause, a challenge. And it's really designed, there's three modules. There's the Citrix ICA protocol, or the protocol decoders, which kind of handle all of our partners. There is the network stack, and then there's the management layer, and that's it. So there's not much in it. And so what that gives us is the ability to have a very tiny attack surface. So there's no APIs, so things that are written for Windows or things that are written for Linux of any sort, those kind of viruses take advantage of shortcomings in the programming or well-intentioned APIs for programmers. We don't have any of those. So the product is literally virus immune because you can't attack it in that way. But what took us from ThinOS to Zenith, now Zenith is probably my favorite product of our product line because I had a big hand in architecting it, this was a device that is 95% hardware, 5% software. And in fact, it's really made up of three very unique components. It is the Citrix receiver for Zenith, which we built with Citrix. You know, I came up with the idea for Zenith on an airplane when I was coming back from a meeting with Apple. What I did is I sat down and started to build a PowerPoint presentation of what the perfect thin client would be. And and my standards are pretty high. I mean, I've been here since day one on this thing. So what we architected out was the Zenith feature set before we even had hardware or software in place. And I took that feature set and I sat down with friends of mine at Citrix and said, if we could build this, what do you think? And I sort of expected a little bit of pushback or some question. Everybody universally loved it. In fact, a week later, we get a call from Mark Templeton. Hey, I hear you guys are working on something really exciting. When can I have one? Oh crap, it only exists on slides right now. So we started the fastest development process Wyse had ever done, because we were having these conversations in February of 2010, and we wanted to have everything ready by May of 2010 for the Citrix Synergy event. So Citrix engineers, Wyse engineers, all of us involved in sort of 24-hour meetings to build this product. And so Zenith 1 came out, and so I was pretty proud of Zenith 1 because it was the fastest startup of any client device. It would start in 10 seconds, and in that 10 seconds, it would automatically check for firmware updates and make the updates if necessary. So you never had any boot storms managing a Zenith 1 device. The second was that it was virus immune. It had the right code in it. The third is it had a real Citrix receiver in it, so it was going to deliver very, very good performance, very fast, and it had no information stored on the device that if the device were stolen by some bad guys, that it could be harvested and create a problem for the company down the road. So if anybody ever tells you that Citrix doesn't have a zero client available to Citrix customers, that's complete nonsense. The best zero client in the world for Citrix is the Zenith device, the Zenith 3 today, and I'll get up and stand in front of anybody and show, you know, engineering design versus whatever malarkey they've heard from a competitor.
Have you had success in, let's say, DoD, that type of area with these devices?
Yeah, I mean, we are so deeply in the government, I'm not allowed to talk about most of it, but there was a time when I was shown a picture of the bunker below the White House, the Clinton administration. You remember they talked about thin clients quite a bit. That was one of the things Hillary talked about. And they put their money where their mouth is. They had those devices there. So and do more than ever before. But they don't return the warranty card, so I don't know where they're going anymore.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the history of Wyse, and I think we've got to the present of, you know, going all the way back to now the Zenith 3 and everything. I want to talk about the future. I'm really obsessed with thin clients right now because ultimately when I came on board at Citrix, I saw that the biggest problems we have are cost and complexity. And you solve that, and then we can actually push this VDI number further than it is today, because I'm unapologetically a fan of VDI. I love it. It's great technology.
Use it every day.
Yeah. But it's just been cost prohibitive in many environments, and in other environments it's just too complex. And so I know the number one area of that is storage, which is why Citrix recently made the acquisition of Symbolic to attack storage head on. And you guys are even doing cool stuff on storage to solve that challenge as well. So, but now that from internally we've looked at it and said, okay, that problem is quote unquote solved. We got work to do, but it's done. We're going to do that. The next thing is thin clients and to look at that. And so we know we have the Zenith thing with you, but I'm also looking forward of where are thin clients going. And so you guys have built this thing.
You're holding a Wyse Cloud Connect from Dell.
Wyse Cloud Connect here, which is an Android on a stick device.
It really is.
And it's very cool. If you haven't seen one of these things, I've wanted to put like my business card information on the back and just hand them out. It's really cool. It's I think what basically is you put it in, you get Android. But right out of the gate, they have their cloud software comes in, and I think by default it installs our software and probably our competitor's software. But it's just, bam, you're in there and you're getting a desktop.
I'll tell you right now, the Citrix software works best on it.
Well, good.
There you go.
But you get it, and basically you're using Android to be a desktop. Now the thing is,
now by the way, it's not just Android. It is a custom hardened version of Android that we did with Google, so that this is. You know, a lot of IT people, you say, hey, we got a good device based on Android, they kind of look at you like, really? And the reality is we understood that. And so we've locked it down in a very pragmatic way and provided a bunch of very manageable capabilities that can be managed by our own Cloud Client Manager software that Dell has. That's our SaaS offering, as well as it supports, Zen sort of technology as well,
yeah.
right?
Well, that's what I wanted to get to, is that this device is the start. This device will come up in a second, but I love this device for a lot of reasons. To start with, we need to make the Android client better. Like, I'll embrace that.
I think we're all learning in that space.
We're all kind of learning, and we got to figure out how to do USB on this. It's just Android was designed for our phones, right? It wasn't necessarily designed to be a desktop replacement. So as we look at that and start thinking, okay, as a desktop replacement device, we need to look at USB and peripherals and all the stuff that come with that. But what I like about this is it tells a bigger story. Right now we sell this thing called Suite, which is Zen Mobile, Zen Apps, and Desktop together, but they're not really together. They're different products that we sell as a single SKU. Sure. But this is kind of the device that makes me think Suite could be a lot more than just different SKUs or different things as a SKU, but actually a product. And so I like this because I picture a world where I plug this in and Zen Mobile immediately takes control of the device and gives you kind of, let's say, Zenith experiences, like a Citrix-specific experience for when you plug a device like this in here. And I know you've had success with the digital signage market.
Digital signage market has taken off on this thing like crazy.
You got the little SSD there, or SD in there. But I really just think that there's so much more ground that we can do together as a company on a device like this. But then this thing came out, and this thing got me even more excited. If you're not aware of this, this is an Intel, I think it's prototype. There's not really a manufacturer out there.
I think it's coming out later this year.
But this is actually x86. So this is SoC, standard Android type thing. This is an x86 quad-core processor, 2 gigs of RAM running Windows 8.
It's essentially a PC.
It's a PC.
Right.
A PC on a stick, Android on a stick.
I think that's the best way to think about it is cell phone without a screen, PC without a screen. Think of it in those terms.
Now the thing is, this is about $100 too. And going Windows to Windows gives us a lot of advantages. DirectX, other things, it just makes it easier. Windows Media Redirection can be redirected to Windows. Everything's use case, right? There's no one answer for everything. But the idea of this device can give me the same thing. Zen Mobile can come in and control it. But this device, apart from Zen App or Zen Desktop, is not all that great. It's designed to be a Chromebook competitor, right? I plug it in, I get Windows 8, it's running an Atom chip. It's not going to be running AutoCAD anytime soon.
Probably not.
But I could take one of your boxes, throw a GPU in it, and now all of a sudden I can get this thing to do anything. The high-end video games or AutoCAD or CATIA, whatever. And so that gets me kind of excited as the market of thin clients is getting really thin and more cost effective, which is great from the standpoint of you solve cost, you solve complexity, meaning one kind of suite of technologies that makes it so out-of-the-box experience. That's what I just think you guys did a hell of a good job with this, is the out-of-the-box experience on this is amazing. I plug it in, you've even changed like the UI of Android, and it's just nice, pretty, what do I want to do? Next, and boom, I'm in a desktop type of thing. And this thing right now is just Windows 8, but I picture a world, and obviously we can't talk about future product or anything else, but I do picture a world where that becomes more just that pretty UI on something like this. But I like that Microsoft is getting in the game more. And
well, it legitimizes the market. I'm a huge fan of both of these products, right? Intel's a big partner of ours, so this isn't about comparing the two or trying to make them competitive, because they really are just designed to do different things, different cost points, different capability points. But I think that what Citrix and Dell are doing especially well right now is simplifying the equation. Our objective, and we've made this pretty clear at Dell, is in terms of desktop virtualization, we want to be the easiest company that can plan, deploy, and run a VDI environment for our customers.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate it. You sitting down with me twice.
It's always a pleasure.
I'm excited for the future of where we take Zenith, where we take our joint collaboration on products like this and others. But thanks for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks to you and Citrix for being such awesome partners.